Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 9:08 East Coast time. It's Friday. It's August 9th. Happy Friday to everybody for the weekend. We got a 2-game NFL slate. Yes, the 11-game slate yesterday was fantastic. I loved it. A lot of action in my lineups down there. David Montgomery, the touchdown from him later in his kind of opportunities was great. The Benny Fowler touchdown was fantastic. Joe Webb, obviously, if you're going to be playing like almost 3 quarters, you're going to do well, or at least you should do somewhat decently well against a bunch of 3rd and 4th stringers off the street. So he ended up doing fine. Packers defense was the only one that I really touted. So that did well as well. So yeah, let's get into this 2-game slate. I'm very excited. Before we do, you can see above my head, the NFL course, the daily fantasy course is officially live. We got about 7 or 8 people already signed up yesterday. 2 to 3 people. I'm requesting feedback. 2 to 3 people already went all the way through it. They said that they enjoyed it, so I'm very excited. It's not just this is how you should build a lineup, or yes, this is what fantasy point run scoring are. No, it's not that simple. It's not that level, but it does start out at a beginner type level, but not the overall building blocks that are obvious. We're going to go into it in that course, building data sheets, how I kind of leverage my plays, how I go about it, everything I know. 5.5 hours of videos. It is about 20 pages of PDF strategy guides, Excel sheets for tracking your bankroll, a ton of stuff. So down below, I just urge you to click the link. It'll take you to a page that describes everything that's in it. See if it's for you. Also down below, a link to Patreon. I have other sports right now in season, MLB, WNBA that I'm covering. Also, I'm going to be covering this slate in more detail on a podcast exclusive only to Patreon later today after I do more and more analysis, which I have all day off today, so I'm going to be doing that. So check that out if you're interested. Link down below to Patreon, link down below to the course. Greatly appreciate all of you. Follow me on Twitter. I'm posting a ton of stuff at SalVetriDFS. And let's get into this. We're going to break it down position by position today. I have spent about 3 to 4 hours just analyzing this 2-game slate alone, which is a lot of hours for just 4 teams. But I want to make sure I got as much news and notes and everything possible before breaking it down. So let's just start team by team in terms of quarterbacks. We'll go through it quickly. And the Saints are the one. They have the highest implied team total at 20. The Steelers are right there, though, at 19.75. But the thing that's nice about the Saints is there's only realistically going to be 2 quarterbacks. They'll dress a 3rd quarterback. Like Drew Brees will play maybe 1 or 2 drives. He's not going to even play the whole first quarter. Teddy Bridgewater, playing his former team in Minnesota, is probably going to be the highest owned quarterback on the slate tonight. On a 2-game slate, it might get up there, actually. So I do like Teddy Bridgewater. The guy's going to play probably a quarter and a half, maybe 2 quarters, most likely closer to a quarter and a half. But Sean Payton said they're going to give him extended run. Sean Payton is the type of guy in the preseason, 1, to see what you have in Teddy Bridgewater. You kind of already know, but let this guy actually play. He's good. He could be a starter for other teams. You're using him as this glorified backup quarterback to Drew Brees. See what you have in him. Let him get more run against his former team. And really, he's a great quarterback. Running the ball, the ability to throw and rush is great. But you also have this guy in Taysom Hill right behind him. So I'm interested in both of these quarterbacks today. I think the ownership is going to come in massively on Teddy Bridgewater. I'll have to kind of see. I don't have any ownership projections. I'm not sure if any sites are actually doing them for the preseason. I highly doubt it since there's so few information actually out there. So Teddy Bridgewater is more the household name. I have interest in both him and Taysom Hill since there's no pricing differences as the highest priced or as the highest total on the slate. It's difficult to say who I like more. I'm going to side with Teddy Bridgewater for overall skill set, but we know that Taysom Hill has the rushing upside. We know that he's probably going to be coming into the game against the 3rd and 4th stringers compared to Teddy Bridgewater coming in against the 2nd and 3rd stringers. So there has to be an advantage given to Taysom Hill there. But if we're just talking overall skill set, it's definitely Teddy Bridgewater, and I would say by a wide margin. People get all hyped up about Taysom Hill because he comes into the game and runs gadget plays. There's a lot more that goes into being a quarterback. I think he's a solid quarterback, but he's not above Teddy Bridgewater even after the injury. So I like Teddy Bridgewater here. He's one of the quarterbacks I'm going to be targeting, but don't sleep on Taysom Hill. They're both valuable today. Let's get into the next quarterbacks. There's nothing really on Minnesota that I'm going to be playing today. A lot of bad quarterbacks. Really, I like the Saints defense, if anything. Jake Browning is the only one that I'll mention, but likely he's only going to be playing a quarter. You have Kirk Cousins, who's supposed to be playing this game and probably sees about half of the first quarter to 3 quarters of the first quarter. And then the rest of the quarterbacks coming in are going to share about a quarter each. Jake Browning benefits from playing all the 4th string scrubs, but I'm not going to get there because relative to other players on the slate, he'll play a quarter, which he can throw 2 touchdowns in a quarter. Like that's likely there's a decent outcome against bad players. But I think there's other quarterbacks on the slate that are going to be pushing more so towards a quarter and a half to 2 quarters and just going to have more opportunities. More opportunities equals more money. I forgot to say, subscribe to this channel, by the way. We're like 80 away or 70 away from 6,000. We were at 1,000 in January. The channel's grown by 6x in like 8 months. I love it so much. This is incredible what we get to do here, and you're helping me build that community. So subscribe if you haven't already. It takes 2 seconds to hit that red button in the corner. Greatly appreciate it. So right now, nothing really interests me in Minnesota, but it is good to mention the fact that Jake Browning is there, going to have a lot of opportunities, and he is a solid QB the way that they drafted him. I'm just still sticking on those New Orleans guys. In Pittsburgh, no Big Ben, Josh Dobbs is going to be starting this game. No interest there. Most of the interest comes from Mason Rudolph and Hodges. Hodges is a guy who's fighting for a playoff spot. Mason Rudolph's going to be on this roster. They drafted him as the guy for the future. They've already said in sort of their meetings that this is the guy who is going to be our quarterback of the future. We're kind of molding him to do so. He's supposed to be playing in most of the second quarter and then half of the third or so. So he's going to be getting a quarter and a half. Dobbs is going to be getting about a quarter. And then Hodges is also going to be getting a quarter and a half against worst opponents. So in this matchup, it's similar to New Orleans. Pittsburgh, the second highest implied team total at 19.75 compared to New Orleans being at 20. That's something to, it would be ignorant of me not to discuss these Vegas team totals to see how Vegas thinks that these offenses are going to perform. But Mason Rudolph is a guy who is the most talented out of all these quarterbacks that he's going to be playing. Maybe not the most cultivated, but the most talented. Hodges, though, is a guy who's desperation right now. He has a lot more he's playing for. Rudolph kind of feels that roster spot right now. Hodges is going to be fighting for one. They're both going to play about a quarter and a half each, I would imagine, with no Big Ben. Dobbs taking the first. Hodges is going to, it depends where you want to go here. Do you think that Hodges playing worse opponents makes him rise above Mason Rudolph's skill level? I can see what that argument is. So similar to Minnesota or similar to New Orleans, Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill are both guys that I'm going to be getting to. I prefer Teddy Bridgewater, but the ownership is probably going to be there as well. Between Mason Rudolph and Hodges, I'm actually going to go to Hodges because I do think that Mason Rudolph is a good QB. I think that he's a great QB. I think his ownership is going to be too high, though, for what he can do. I don't think he's as cultivated, nowhere near as cultivated as Teddy Bridgewater is at this standpoint. That's why I kind of prefer Teddy Bridgewater in that situation. And I do like the fact that Hodges is going to be going up against his fourth-string defense and probably virtually unowned, to be completely honest with you. So that's where I lean on that side. I'm really only getting to Pittsburgh and New Orleans in terms of quarterbacks. Tampa Bay, I will mention Griffin. I don't think there's any news or notes on him. Just Ryan Griffin right here. The main reason why is Jameis Winston's going to come out here and play maybe a quarter at best, if that. Then Blaine Gabbert will take over. He'll play the second quarter. But then for the most part, Griffin's going to be playing the majority of the second half because you have Nick Fitzgerald who's injured right now. So you're going to have Griffin playing a far chunk of the second half against Pittsburgh third and fourth stringers. So again, there's a lot of quarterbacks that are in play today. 2 from New Orleans, 2 from Pittsburgh. I would prefer Teddy Bridgewater over Taysom Hill. I would prefer Hodges over Mason Rudolph, although I think Mason Rudolph is a good QB. And then I do think Ryan Griffin is in play. So those are sort of the 3 guys that I'm looking at the most. Mason Rudolph would be my number 4 guy. And yeah, I think they're all very close. I think Teddy Bridgewater is on his own tier just due to skill level, just due to the fact that he's going to get extended run about a quarter and a half today, most likely, if not more. Sean Payton wants to play him more against this his former team. He's already come out and said that he's going to get significant run, more so than he would usually get. So that said, I do like him, but keep in mind ownership on a 2-game slate does come into play. And yeah, that's quarterbacks. Let's move over to running backs as I have a list right here. Running backs is kind of the spot that I'm very excited about. We'll start here, who's the guy I'm most excited about on this slate. So Pittsburgh, there's probably going to be no James Conner. If he even plays at all, I doubt he plays. And then you have Jalen Samuels, who will play. Jalen Samuels might touch the ball a decent amount in the second quarter, but the entire second half, the far majority of the workload is going to be going to Benny Snell Jr. He's been turning a ton of heads in practice. He's a guy who can not only pass, block, but actually catch the ball. He's this versatile back that, honestly, in the regular season, he might be getting some run. Jalen Samuels has been shown to catch the ball. He was a tight end in college, who's the number 2 guy right now. But there's a chance Benny Snell is already kind of secured into this third running back role. And, I mean, he's 1 injury away from being fantasy relevant in the regular season. This kid's kind of electric. He's the talk of the town right now in Pittsburgh. I'm most likely going to be getting to a lot of Benny Snell. Next up, so Benny Snell is like a clear-cut running back option today. Next guy up is Ronald Jones Jr. Now, you know Ronald Jones Jr., or if you play fantasy, you probably do. Look, Peyton Barber is listed as the number 1 right now on Tampa Bay's depth chart. Bruce Arians already said that Ronald Jones Jr. is going to come out and be running with the 2s, which means he will get some run. But I don't want to get to Ronald Jones Jr. I think he's going to be over-owned today, but this is not the week. Week 1 is not the week. Bruce Arians is the guy who said it himself. 80% of the game is going to be going to the bottom 25 roster spots, the bubble watch. Ronald Jones Jr. is not on the bubble watch. He's actually rising. He came into camp in much more shape. He looks more elusive. So although I think he's a very interesting, maybe week 2, definitely a week 3 type of fantasy guy for the preseason, right now is not the time. So when everybody else is hyping up Ronald Jones Jr. today because, oh, he's running with the 2s and he looks great. Yeah, he could look great. He could be going up against backups, which is going to be very beneficial for his skill set. But at the same time, and he's also worked on his pass-catching game. But at the same time, would you rather have this guy facing the backups for 1 quarter, if that, 2 possessions, or would you rather have the backup to him, the 3rd and 4th string, which I actually don't want them because I think there's better options on this slate, or would you rather have the 3rd string and 4th string guys on another team, like a Benny Snell Jr., like a Snell Jr., and then they're going to be playing worse opponents, and they're probably just as much upside. So not going to get to Ronald Jones just because the opportunities aren't going to be there today. I think he's a fine back. I think he's a good back, and he's going to be a sleeper for the regular season, for the rest of the preseason, but not weeks 1, definitely not week 4 when nobody plays. He's just not going to have as much opportunities as some of these other guys on the slate. It's worth mentioning, though, because I know I'm going to get a ton of questions if I don't list him. Oh, Sal, you didn't list Ronald Jones Jr. He's been looking great in camp. Yeah, but it's week 1 of the preseason still. There's a lot of other guys who are going to have opportunities. Help me out with this name here, Devin Ozigbo. Yeah, so Ozigbo right now you have out there for this team in New Orleans. You're gonna have no Alvin Kamara. I doubt he plays. You're gonna have Latavius Murray coming in the Mark Ingram role, going to get some work. I imagine Latavius Murray gets a good amount of work. They want to implement him into this offense, into the Mark Ingram role is what Sean Payton's trying to do. But Ozigbo has been turning heads in practice as well. He's an elusive runner right now, especially, which is rare for his body type. Just the weight that he has on him to be so elusive, it's very similar to, I want to say, like a Michael Turner back in the day. He was a guy who can break free from Atlanta. He kind of like a Steven Jackson in a sense. Very elusive. He's shifty. Saquon Barkley type speed. It's crazy how a guy's a second-year player now, was a rookie last year, and people are comping him to Saquon. That's how great Saquon is. But Saquon Barkley type shiftiness. He's a pass catcher as well. He's right now slated in to get the lion's share of the work for this running back unit. I imagine double-digit touches, whether it comes from in the air and on the ground. It's just a great opportunity. He's going to be going out there, coming in as sort of the second down back or the second back overall. I imagine Kamara's not playing, but I imagine him to play a solid 2 quarters or so, get a lot of opportunities, play 4 or 5 possessions. They want to see what they have in him. He looks fantastic. He is kind of pro-ready almost to be, he can kind of be a backup on a lot of teams, and he's going to be going up against 3rd and 4th stringers. Another spot at running back that I'm really liking today. And then lastly, another guy who's supposed to get the lion's share of the work from Minnesota, right? So I don't know if Dalvin Cook plays. If he does, it's not going to be like too much there. So right now, Madison is going to be listed as the number 2 running back. He's going to be behind Dalvin Cook. And this is a situation where, yeah, but Sal, if he's coming in listed as the number 2, does he get that much work actually? Because you just said that you're not that high on Ronald Jones. Yes, I agree with that. But also Madison is a rookie, so they're going to give him more run. The guy behind him is actually Amir Abdullah, who's a Lion running back. He was drafted high, and then he kind of just busted. Abdullah, though, is a veteran. He's probably going to be fighting for his spot and his workload. But I imagine they give as much opportunity to Madison as they can. Madison had 86 carries for 1,200 yards his last year at Boise State. He ranked 10th overall in career rushing yards there. I like him. I like the shiftiness he brings. I like the depth of the other 2 guys. They're going to be going up against worse players, but they already said that Madison is going to be getting the lion's share of the work, which for me, that means that if Dalvin Cook plays, it's for 1-2 series at most, and then Madison can potentially be playing in and out for the next 2 quarters. He's not as guaranteed to have a lot of touches compared to the other running backs that we've talked about, but I do like his upside here. I think Amir Abdullah is also in play, but I'm just not going to get there as much because they kind of know what they have. They've seen him in practice. They've seen his tape from years past. They know what Amir Abdullah has to offer for this team. Madison, they don't kind of know, and they want to see what that looks like in a live practice, a live scrimmage. I think he's going to be getting a good amount of the workload. That is the running backs. Let's go over to the wide receivers. Panera just sent me a save $4 on dressing. I don't want that, Panera. My Lord. Wide receivers is the sketchy position today. So you have a lot of options at quarterback. You have some talented young running backs at or talented players in the running back department that you can kind of rely on today, in my opinion, just due to the amount of work they're going to be getting. Wide receiver is the question mark here. So let me pull up this little wide receiver page here. We can start with Pittsburgh. So Dante Moncrief is questionable. Look, these are the starters, so I'm not telling you to play Dontre Moncrief. I'm just letting you know that he is going to be probably the wide receiver 2. He's leading the way as the wide receiver 2 here, taking it away from the James Washingtons and the Eli Rogers of the world. I don't have much interest, even though there's going to be a high total, 19.75, and some decent QBs, right? Mason Rudolph, Dobbs to an extent, throwing the ball around. I guess my only interest is James Washington. Now, I already know he's kind of the wide receiver 3 on this team, de facto wide receiver 2. I just have no other interest in Pittsburgh. Now, it doesn't say go and play. A lot of guys are injured as well. There's probably going to be no Holton, no Switzer today. So I have interest in like the James Washington and the Eli Rogers. I just do know that they're probably not going to make it out of like the first quarter or midway through the second before they get pulled, because they actually are meaningful as depth chart guys, the wide receiver 3 and 4 on this roster. What I'm hoping for there, if I roster James Washington, One, to see him work a little bit harder to try and regain the wide receiver 2 crown from a Dontre Moncrief, where it is right now. And really, it's just like, can he score in the first quarter? Can he score a touchdown and get me 10 to 12 fantasy points in the first quarter? I'm not expecting much volume. We saw yesterday Adam Humphries had 4 catches on 6 targets on 8 of Marcus Mariota's pass attempts. That's very rare, but that's something that I want from Washington here. Can James Washington catch 2 to 3 balls on 4 targets for like 20 to 30 yards and a touchdown? That's what you're working with. The opportunities aren't there. I don't really like any of the Pitt wide receivers, but if you made me choose one for you, it would be James Washington and then Eli Rogers. I don't like the depth there. There's too many injuries. And once it starts getting lower and lower, you're really just taking shots. There's no news on Spencer, Tevin Jones, really. There's no news on any of these guys in camp. So you're just throwing a random dart in and guessing, and I'd rather not do that as much as I can. I'll continue to try and find information on them. Probably can the more and more I look. And that'll be on Patreon later today in a podcast format. So again, you can sign up down below and definitely check out the course while we're at it. You don't have to purchase it if you don't want to, but at least read what's in there to see if it's interesting. I spent months on that course, so I'm excited that it's out. Tampa Bay has so much depth at wide receiver, so trying to pick between these wide receiver young guys on Tampa Bay is going to be really difficult. You're not going to see Mike Evans. You're not going to see much of Chris Godwin. You're probably not going to see much Perriman. Justin Watt is somebody to look at or Watson, because he's going to be going back to Pittsburgh today. He's a Pittsburgh native, so if you want to kind of play that narrative, he's going to be playing in front of a lot of his hometown crowd. But outside of that, there's really not much that has been, maybe not standing out. You have Mitchell, who has looked good. You have Miller, who is probably the guy that I would get to the most if I had to play one of these guys. Scotty Miller's probably he has gotten the most praise from Mike Evans, which take it as you want. But he's gotten the most praise from Mike Evans. He's been working with Mike Evans. Again, similar to Pittsburgh, this is a spot where I'm not finding much depth. And wide receiver today is a big question mark. We're going to get to New Orleans, where a couple of guys are standing out. We're going to get to Minnesota, where there's a couple options. But Pittsburgh, nothing really stands out. Tampa Bay, if you want to play the Justin Watson narrative that he's going back home to Pittsburgh. And also, he's slated right now as the wide receiver 4/5, getting a lot of run in practice with the second unit. You can say that that's one option. If Scotty Miller is in, I probably prefer him over everybody else. He seems to be the most athletic. He's definitely the fastest player on the team. And Mike Evans has kind of given him the valve support. On New Orleans, this is where I'm going to get to wide receivers the most, so it actually makes sense if you want to stack a Teddy Bridgewater or Taysom Hill with one of these wide receivers. There's a couple of guys that I do like here. We'll start down right here. This man's name is literally Lil Jordan Humphries. That's his name. His name is Lil' Jordan Humphries. I'm not even kidding. Lil Jordan Humphries. So some notes on him from the Combine. So this guy, he did not actually get drafted as high as he should have in the Combine. He was a versatile guy, had like a 1,200-yard season in his final season in college, but he dropped in the draft order because he had a poor Combine. He just didn't run well at the Combine. He didn't play well at the Combine or just perform. He actually did well at Pro Day, but he had a lot of knocks on his chinks in his armor, because when he was at his Pro Day, he did well, but instead of running extra wide receiver routes, he went and ran some tight end routes, and people were like, why are you doing this? And his main reason was, well, I want to show that I have versatility, and a lot of NFL scouts were, we want to see you run wide receiver routes. You're a wide receiver. So he dropped. He's actually a lot more talented than where the Saints got him in the draft, which is good for him. He gets to play on the Saints offense, and he's a better receiver. It's good for the Saints offense as well. This stuff always pops up. So Lil Jordan Humphries is a guy that I'm actually looking in and keying in on. He was a versatile guy. Like I said, he caught almost 100 passes in his last year for 1,200 yards, almost double-digit touchdowns. He's a guy who is expected to kind of be the third wide receiver to fourth wide receiver on this team, probably closer to the fourth, fifth wide receiver, actually, now that I think about it. And he's supposed to be expected, actually what I was trying to read was he's expected to be the fourth or fifth wide receiver on this team he's fighting for, and he's expected to also go up against the third and fourth team units and get a lot of wide receiver run pretty much the whole second half. So this is the wide receiver that I'm probably keying in on almost the most today, because there's just so many question marks with all the other teams' wide receivers. He seems like a guy who has the talent. He's been shining in the practices, and he's going to get a lot of opportunities to perform. Next guy up. Same exact team, looking at this real quickly, same exact team is going to be Emmanuel Butler. And the thing with Emmanuel Butler is if he's going to play today. So he's been dealing with an injury. DraftKings doesn't have him in for an injury. He's been very impressive. He's going to probably get on a roster spot. He's on that bubble watch, though. So when players are on the bubble watch, they're going to play the entire fourth quarter and the biggest part of the third quarter. So he's right there on the bubble watch. It's already kind of been stated that he is kind of one of those last guys on the 53-man roster. In college, he was one of the better yards after the catch guys, and his catch radius is one of the best in college. It's probably one of the best on this team. You obviously have Michael Thomas on this team, but he's probably has one of the best catch radiuses on this team. Now, that only gets you so far, but when you have a guy who's very accurate in Drew Brees and putting the ball anywhere around you, that's a good skill to have because you can make up for when Drew Brees is a little bit off, right? And it just makes your offense that more efficient. So Emmanuel Butler, Little Jordan Humphreys are the two players that on the wide receiver end, I like the most today from this New Orleans team. Really stand out guys overall. There's other players that you can get to on this team. Kirkwood has been turning heads. He was a guy who in the regular season had a good amount of opportunities, got in the end zone towards the mid to end of the season, actually quite often last year. So he's another option as well. Minnesota in terms of wide receivers today, not much. Another team that doesn't have much going on there. One guy that I will mention, though, for wide receivers is right here. We're going to talk about Dylan Mitchell. So Mitchell came in as one of the more talented wide receivers that they were expecting to kind of make the team and be that third guy right behind Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. But he's kind of regressed downwards now, and he's like on the bubble. So we like this for preseason week 1. Another guy on the bubble. Not only is he on the bubble, the main reason why is because he's talented, he has speed, he has the ability, but he is dropping balls in the preseason, and that's not great. So he's on the bubble. He's a guy who has to prove himself, and he's talented. So you're getting a guy who is not just this dirtbag who's not going to, I don't want to say dirtbag, but not just this crappy player who's barely going to make the team. He's just been trending down the depth chart in theory, whatever depth charts that they have, because he's just been dropping the ball. So if he can come out and perform and actually catch it, he is talented enough against third and fourth string guys to actually make a difference. So I do like Mitchell today. Outside of that, not a lot standing out. Chad Beebe is a guy who kind of stands out. Treadwell's a guy who's a burner. But in terms of making the most out of their opportunities, I think it's Mitchell here. So we named about 4 or 5 wide receivers. Again, wide receiver is the most sketchy spot on this slate, in my opinion, even more sketchy than tight end. I'll name a couple of tight ends for you. They're both young guys. Zach Gentry, really quickly from Pittsburgh. He's a guy who's mainly a pass-catching tight end, which is good for fantasy. His issue, though, so good for fantasy. His issue, though, is that he's terrible at pass blocking. That's bad for getting on the field. You can't be good and get production in fantasy if you're not on the field. So in the regular season, that's going to be a concern. You're going to have Grimble most likely not playing tonight. Vance McDonald playing only a little. So I think Zach Gentry, what is this, baseball? But Gentry is going to be a guy who gets enough opportunities out there, even though he's a bad pass blocker, at least opportunities to improve that in a live game format, but also go out for a decent amount of passing attempts. And then lastly, this is the last tight end I'll talk about. There's only 2. There's more tight ends on the slate, but these are the 2 I'm going to look at. Irv Smith Jr. has been a versatile guy in training camp right now. They kind of said that they're using him everywhere, which is good for fantasy. He's been put out wide, great for fantasy, right? A lot more tight ends are getting that. In the slot, great for fantasy, shows his versatility, and also in the backfield, not only to block, but actually go out of the backfield on wheel routes. So you get a very versatile tight end that they're trying to incorporate into this offense. They said that the tight ends coach says that he needs to be implemented into this offense, meaning that he's so versatile that they can do so many things with him, and he could be a threat. Well, if you want to see him in live action, put him in right now. Put the young kid into this game. He should get opportunities at a position that is just pretty much a dart throw on most weeks. So that's where I'm at right now. Running back has some obvious options in my opinion. Wide receiver, like what I said here is what my opinions are as of right now. I'm going to be breaking deeper down into wide receiver, deeper into quarterback later today on Patreon podcast. So there's a couple options. We talked about 4 solid options, potentially 5 for quarterback. Again, that's a lot for a 2-game slate, but that's just the nature of the slate right now. There's a lot of guys who are going to have opportunity. We talked about 3 or 4 solid running back options. Wide receiver, we talked about 5. A lot of them are murky. I like the Saints guys. And then tight ends, we talked about 2 who I think are the best pass-catching guys. A lot of tight ends are just going to be staying on the line. You're going to be playing a guy because you don't know his name, or you saw some guy who's misinformed on YouTube or in an article write about a tight end who's a blocking tight end, and how the hell are they going to do anything for you in fantasy? The 2 guys that I named will probably have the most opportunities today in terms of just time on the field because they're not the first team guys, and also opportunities in terms of the targets because they're pass-catching tight ends. In terms of defenses, it's a toss-up. I think I do lean to the Saints because I think that the Minnesota backup guys outside of Kirk Cousins are all dreadful. I think they're just really bad. So, but at the same time, you're going to be playing 3rd or 4th string defenses this whole time in terms of the players on them. So it's a toss-up. We'll talk about it more in the Patreon podcast later. Please do check out the course link down below. It's right there, the first thing. You can see what's all in the course if you click that link. There's a 10% coupon that's going to end by the end of the weekend. $10 off coupon, actually. So yeah, check that all out. Patreon will be up later today. Follow me on Twitter @SalvageDFS, and make sure to subscribe before you leave. Peace out, guys.